Welcome to ThinkTech Asia. I'm your host, Bill Sharp, President of Sharp Research and Translation. My guest today is Ambassador Raymond F. Burghardt, who is Chairman of the Board of the American Institute in Taiwan. Our topic today is Taiwan looks at the 2016 presidential and legislative elections. Welcome to ThinkTech Asia.
Good afternoon, Bill. Great to be here.
Good to have you. Well, the 9-1 elections in November was really a very devastating rout for the Nationalist Party. Why is it? Why was that the case, do you think?
Well, Bill's referring to the elections that were held in November, and which were elections for county and city leaders and so forth. And yes, the ruling party, the Nationalist Party, the Kuomintang, did quite poorly. The opposition party, which has been out of power in both the legislature and in the presidency in Taiwan now for since 2008, did very well. Had really a pretty strong comeback. I think there are a lot of reasons for that. There was unhappiness with the president and his party from many quarters over a lot of things. Some people felt that the normalization of relations with mainland China had gone too quickly, that there was too much influence now that Beijing had on the society and on the economy. Young people especially turned out to vote in much higher percentages than had been the case in the past. There were big demonstrations in Taiwan last spring, and young people who took part in those demonstrations were protesting a proposed trade and services agreement. They picked that to protest against because it was a target for their unhappiness with relations with China moving too quickly, and China feeling that Taiwan was losing control over itself. So all of that and the higher turnout of young people was an important factor. And I think another factor was a lot of President Ma's usual supporters, former retired military, civil servants, their families. A lot of those people stayed home. And part of that was over some very local issues. President Ma had toughened up on pensions for civil servants, some things like that. So all in all, a bad day for the president and his party. Yeah.
Do you think it marks a permanent change in Taiwan politics?
I don't know. Nothing ever seems permanent in Taiwan politics. I'm not sure, but I think if the ruling party has to worry about the presidential elections that will be held next year in January 2016. Right now it looks as if the opposition is looking pretty strong, and so a lot can happen between now and then. But if this higher turnout of young voters, and if this sort of lower turnout of the ruling party supporters, if that trend continues, they're in trouble. So.
It also seems to me the swing voter factor is becoming more and more important in Taiwan politics. You mentioned the young people, but it seems like you're getting more and more swing voters.
I don't know. I guess there are. The polls show that there is a larger percentage of people who don't feel firmly committed to one party or the other.
Wow. Right. Disenchantment with both the major parties. Right. That's a very interesting phenomenon. I was personally disgusted by a sort of ethnic slur coming forth from Ying-jeou in the Taipei mayoral race. And, it seemed to me that he was opening up ethnic wounds that have pretty well been healed. And he gets into this argument about Taiwanese versus mainlander and that sort of thing. I was wondering if that, was of concern to you or impressed you? Or...
Well, just explain to listeners who maybe don't pay as much microscopic attention to Taiwan politics as Bill and I do. What's called ethnic politics in Taiwan wouldn't really be called ethnic politics most places. It's the difference between the 85% of the population who are descended from people who came from China in the 17th century, from Fujian province, just on the other side of the strait, and the 15% or so who are descended from the army that fled the mainland after they lost the Civil War in 1949, and their families who come from northern China or Shanghai area and so forth. I think, you know, that kind of distinction has some, there tend to be more of the people whose families came from the mainland in the 1940s and 50s who support the now ruling party, the KMT, the Nationalist Party, and more of the people from whose families came, you know, 300, 400 years ago, tend to be more likely to support the opposition. Mm-hmm. But you know, one of the things that's fascinating is that you have a lot of intermarriage and and these distinctions are breaking down. Mm. And actually, I have been struck by the fact that people have not talked about it as much as a political factor as they did 4 years ago and 8 years ago in elections. Yeah.
Do you think this marks, I mean, Ying-jeou was certainly very heavily involved in the Taipei mayoral race and was out there campaigning for his son. And a lot of people say that his son ran for that position mainly because of his father's insistence. Do you think this marks the end of the Ying-jeou era? Is he going to fade into history, or?
I don't know. This is getting pretty obscure stuff. Ying-jeou was the former vice president in Taiwan. He ran for president and lost twice. He tends to be quite sympathetic toward better relations with Beijing and mainland China. His son ran for mayor and lost. I think he's something of a, you know, I mean, he has influence, I'd say, is, you know, sort of, as is normal for someone who's been out of politics for a long time, I think is sort of gradually fading out, yeah. Mm. Yeah.
Given the scale of defeat that the KMT suffered, it seems to me that President Ma probably should have resigned the presidency as well as party chair. Do you have any take on that?
In the United States, when a president's party has a bad interim election result, as President Obama's party just did, we don't expect the president to resign. So I think that's a little bit extreme. Yeah.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Okay. But
it is a presidential system, so that's not normally the pattern in a presidential system. Yeah.
Well, okay, and it seems that, okay, he did resign as the chair of the KMT, and Ying-jeou was elected party chair. I was wondering, you have undoubtedly met him. I was wondering what your take on him is.
I met him. I had, the last time I was in Taiwan at the very end of September, I had dinner with him. And we had met before, but it was the first time I'd had a long talk with him. He looks like he's, you know, the polls show him as the most popular ruling party candidate for president. And he still would have a tough time against the leader of the opposition party, who polls even better right now. But of course, the elections aren't right now, so we'll see. Yeah, I thought he's a smart guy, quite knowledgeable, has done well in the local elections. Looks like you know. We'll see who the ruling party chooses. He said he's not going to run. But,
yeah, that's my next question.
Politicians often say they're not going to run, you know, and then they end up running. So yeah. When I met with him, which was before the disastrous November election, but when I met with him in, like, I think it was like September 28th or so, he seemed pretty confident he was going to run. So, yeah.
Of course, his last race was a bit of a shock, wasn't it? I mean, Yossi Kun was, his opponent was pretty much considered over the hill.
Well, you know, Ying-jeou barely won. He was close. But on the other hand, he did win.
Right,
and a lot of other people from his party didn't win. So.
Right. Does the KMT have any choices other than Ying-jeou? I mean,
I don't want to get into, you know,
you don't
analyze. I represent the United States. I mean, I don't want to analyze the ruling party's various candidates.
Okay, so, yeah. Fair enough. Fair enough. Well, Ying-jeou, he talks a lot about constitutional change. And of course, I mean, he's not the only one in Taiwan that talks about constitutional change. He advocates a presidential system along with a parliamentary one, something like France. What would be the advantage of that to Taiwan?
I don't know. They talk about that in Taiwan. I personally find it a subject hard to get interested in. But they do have a bit of an odd hybrid system where they have an elected president, and then they have an appointed prime minister. Mm-hmm. But they don't have a parliamentary system, so it's not like a prime minister in Great Britain or something like that. It's a little more like the French system, sort of a mixture. So it seems to work okay.
It seems every time that they start to talk about constitutional change, both Beijing and Washington get concerned, not knowing exactly where this is going to go.
Well, the history of that comes from back in 2004, when the previous president, who represented the opposition party, and in Taiwan, the opposition party, the DPP, or Democratic Progressive Party, is more in favor of independence, of sort of taking a position that we will never unify with mainland China. And so they are a party that makes Beijing nervous and hostile. And way back then in 2004, Chen Shui-bian, the former president, had some ideas of constitutional changes which would have strengthened, which would have sort of made unification more difficult, which would have strengthened the sense of separateness. And so that's why Beijing gets nervous about it. But actually, there have been major constitutional changes in Taiwan over the years, and they frankly didn't cause all that much havoc in the long run. So yeah.
Good. Let's take a break here. I'm your host, Bill Sharp. My guest today is Ambassador Raymond Burghardt, who's chairman of the board of the American Institute in Taiwan. We've been talking about the looking forward to the 2016 presidential and legislative elections in Taiwan, and we'll be right back.
We're here with Hunter Haviland because he is a member of our panel on February 26th. We're going to talk about Hawaii, the state of unfunded liabilities. Hi, Hunter.
Hi, Jay.
So what does it look like from your point of view, being on that panel?
Well, part of my work is with the Asia Pacific Center for Regenerative Design. And so with that, we're kind of taking a broader notion of, when we talk about liabilities, what are some of the external factors, right? So if we're talking about sustainability across the globe, resilience to natural disasters, our use of natural resources, and how those things do or don't get incorporated into our current understandings of the state of the state.
Yeah, and thus the liabilities, and thus the economy. Yeah. So that's February 26th. It's a Thursday. It's at Laniakea. It starts at 12 noon. Come down 11:30 for lunch. Check out our website to sign up, thinktechhawaii.com. Hunter is one of 7 speakers. We'll be trying to talk to some of the others too, let you know what they're going to do. And sign up. We'll see you there. It'll be important. It's one of the most important things we can think of. Aloha.
Aloha.
Welcome back to ThinkTech Asia. I am your host, Bill Sharp. My guest today is Ambassador Raymond Burghardt. We've been talking about the looking forward to the 2016 presidential and legislative elections in Taiwan. One other topic that's been mentioned in Taiwan, the need for change, is decentralization. And I know Lee Dong-wei has been saying that, and of course he's somewhat elderly, but he's not the only person in Taiwan that's saying that. Do you have any take on that?
You mean decentralization of power down to the counties
or
the
to the local levels? Yeah.
Taiwan's a pretty small place, so 23 million people. It's the land mass is, I don't know, the state of Oregon or something, or not even that. So I think I think the process has been going on. I mean, the counties do have a certain amount of authority. They're almost like, they're provinces. They're like, sort of districts. I think I don't sense that that's a huge debate these days. But I think the trend is in that direction, I think.
Interesting. Well, now, we talked about Ying-jeou, and of course, Tsai Ing-wen is the leader of the opposition party, the DPP, as you mentioned. Is she ready to lead Taiwan?
I've known Tsai Ing-wen for a long time. When I went to Taiwan as director, as the person sort of based in Taiwan, we sort of like it would be called we would call it our ambassador anywhere else. But
Sure.
since we technically don't have relations with Taiwan, we call it the director of AIT, the American Institute in Taiwan. And she was the head of the office that dealt with the Mainland Affairs Council, so under the previous government. So I dealt with her a lot. Later, she became deputy prime minister, dealt with her a lot. She's a very experienced person. She's a trade lawyer by background and training. She's a real whiz on foreign trade issues. Has that experience of dealing with the mainland also, which is of course important in Taiwan. She doesn't have too much experience on she would acknowledge that she's not too knowledgeable about military and security issues. But overall, but no president comes into office, including in our own country, strong in every one of the parts of the portfolio of a chief of state. So yeah, she's very experienced, and very smart. So it becomes it's not so much a question of experience. It's a political issue, And so the question is. The question that the voters of Taiwan will be debating is whether they want an opposition party because they don't like the economic policies of the current government and they think the economy's been growing too slowly, or if they are unhappy with the policies toward mainland China of the current government and they react by voting for the opposition. But on the other hand, some of the people in the last, Tsai Ing-wen ran for president in 2008 and lost. And one of the reasons was that there was nervousness among a lot of the population.
2012, wasn't it?
2012, I'm sorry, 2012. There was nervousness among a lot of the population that the opposition party, led by Ms. Tsai, was not going to handle relations with Beijing well, that it was going to result in a blow-up. It was going to result in even possibly conflict, or at a minimum that you have to understand there's a huge amount of investment by Taiwan in mainland China now. There are hundreds of flights back and forth every day. There's over 1 million people from Taiwan living in mainland China running factories.
Right.
So all of that is something very important to the economy of Taiwan and very important to many people's jobs.
Right.
So in 2012, for example, what happened was a lot of business owners who owned businesses that that invest in China, they got nervous that if Tsai Ing-wen became president and wrecked the relations with China, handled it badly, that their businesses would be affected.
Right.
And many of the workers in Taiwan work for factories that either produce components that are used over in the mainland, or they get components from the mainland and assemble them into things. There's this constant, there's huge trade and cooperative, manufacturing that goes on, particularly in the information technology sector. And so a lot of that affected the election. A lot of workers were basically scared by their bosses into voting for the ruling party and not taking a chance on the opposition party, afraid that relations with China would be wrecked. So most analysts think that will still be a factor, but maybe not as strong this time because people are more, there's a little bit more sense that the improved relations across the strait maybe has mostly benefited rich people. It hasn't benefited the workers so much. So I don't know. It may not be as big a factor, but it will be a factor.
Some people say that the DPP is more pragmatic now than it was before.
Well, they sort of learned from problems they had. You know, I mean, the previous government, the Chen Shui-bian government, Chen Shui-bian could be quite radical sometimes.
Right.
You know, it sometimes seemed as if he woke up every morning and kind of thought, now how can I poke Beijing in the eye today? You know, I mean, that's a slight exaggeration, but he was something, and I knew him very, very, very well.
I know what you're saying. At the same time,
So,
depend on America to bail me out, no matter what the situation is.
So I think that Taiwan's not like that. A little more reason, more measured, you know, less radical. And I think also that because the mainland was so nervous about the DPP winning in 2012, and because even in the US there was some unease that she was not explaining her China policy very clearly, and some in Washington even leaked that judgment to the press. That's made Tsai herself and her party determined to not cause those kind of problems next time.
So do you think that Washington is ready to accept her as a president?
We, you know, one of the defining factors of American diplomacy is that wherever we serve overseas, we're very careful to cultivate the opposition party as well as the ruling party. You know, sometimes we do that in countries where the ruling party gets very unhappy about the fact that we cultivate the opposition party. That's not the case in Taiwan because it's a true democracy. But we know her. We will work with whoever wins.
And that's great.
Yeah.
Now, as you mentioned before during the break, a lot of people might not be that familiar with the American Institute in Taiwan. And since you're the chairman,
Right.
what better of a spokesperson
Right.
to have with us?
Some people have said that everything we do with Taiwan is a little odd. As many of your viewers know, but some people understandably might not follow this obscure stuff. In 1979, we broke diplomatic relations with Taiwan. Before that, we actually had an embassy in Taiwan. We recognized Taiwan as the Republic of China. We did not have relations with Beijing, with the People's Republic of China. Then in 1979, on January 1st, we recognized Beijing and we de-recognized Taiwan. And this is because Beijing insisted, and at the time Taiwan also insisted, that only one or the other could be recognized as China. So for many reasons, you know, including the enormous size of mainland China and the importance of being able to work with them against the Soviets, which was the Nixon-Kissinger strategy. We set up an embassy in Beijing. And then, but we didn't want to lose completely our relationship with Taiwan. It was a place that we felt we had a long-standing commitment to. Some of that commitment was reaffirmed in the Taiwan Relations Act of 1979. And so we set up this nonprofit corporation called the American Institute in Taiwan, which in reality is an entity, is a sort of an entity that functions on behalf of the US government. Okay. And the American Institute in Taiwan runs a mission in Taipei, which walks, talks, looks, is pretty much like a normal embassy.
Right.
And then in, except, you know, the names are all different. We don't, the ambassador is the director and so forth, you know. So that it's sort of a cover that makes it look as if we have unofficial relations.
Okay.
And legally they are unofficial relations. But in terms of the way they function and when they work, they are not substantially different than relations with any other country in the world. And then I had that job. I was the representative in Taiwan back from 1999, 2001. And then since 2006, I've been the chair of the Washington office, which is sort of the home office, the backup office for our relationship with Taiwan.
And the U.S. is building a new, well, what should we call it? An
Office
absence of the word of embassy. Office building?
Yeah, we're building a new office building.
Very fancy one.
It's going to be quite substantial office building. It shows our commitment to Taiwan and the importance we attach to the relationship. The building we have now is very inadequate, and the building we're building will be very much more functional, more secure. Everything about it will be better. But it's a testimony to the importance we attach to the relationship. I mean, since 1979, I mean, well, the people who, in the Carter administration who, at that time, never imagined that in 2015, Taiwan would be the prosperous and democratic place that it is today, and that the relationship would be so important on its own rights. I mean, at that time, it was really sort of viewed as a problem, as a nuisance in our relationship with China, and our new relationship with China. We're way beyond that now. Taiwan is a global success story, really a miraculous success story against some pretty bad odds. And it doesn't have a lot of natural resources, has a very awkward status in the world. But Taiwan is our 10th largest trading partner, which is amazing for an economy of 23 million people. We do more trade with Taiwan than we do with India or with Saudi Arabia.
Wow, Saudi Arabia, wow.
Well, the drop in the price of oil helped
that
but
helps,
but it's important and significant. And for Taiwan, last year we surpassed Japan to become their second largest trading partner after China. So it's huge, and the investment on both sides is very big. Taiwan investment in the United States is actually increasing. Petrochemical companies and others are very interested in the shale oil revolution and pouring money into Texas, for petrochemical plants and so forth. So very healthy relationship in many ways.
Good. Let's take a break here. I'm your host, Bill Sharp. Our guest today is Ambassador Raymond Burghardt. We've been talking about Taiwan, taking a look, at several aspects of Taiwan, particularly looking ahead to the 2016 presidential and legislative elections. We'll be right back.
Hi, my name is Seymour Kazimirski. I have a show called Seymour's World on ThinkTech Hawaii. Our show is about opening minds and facilitating conversations. To tell you the truth, I have no idea what we're going to be talking about. I have no idea who our guests are going to be, but I guarantee you we're going to have lots and lots of fun. Aloha from Seymour's World.
Hi, I'm Jay Fidel. That's Ted Ralston. Ted is the host of Where the Road Leads. It shows every Friday from 4 to 5 p.m. It's about technology. It's about how people collaborating and solve problems with modern technology. It's where the road leads. We all know that. We should all be listening. Join us there, 4 to 5 p.m. every Friday. Now, what about that do you agree with?
All of it.
I knew he'd say that. Aloha. Say aloha.
Aloha.
Good.
Welcome back to ThinkTech Asia. I'm your host, Bill Sharp. My guest today is Ambassador Raymond Burghardt, who's chairman of the board of the American Institute in Taiwan. Okay, you laid out for us what AIT is, and I'm sure that our viewers appreciate that. What about U.S.-Taiwan relations?
Well, I'd say it's strong relations, good relations, very busy relationship. I was served in some of our embassies in countries in Latin America and in the Philippines and other places. Frankly, the relationship with Taiwan is in many ways more important for us for both commercial reasons, for security reasons, than many of the official relations we have with countries around the world. One of the important aspects of the Taiwan Relations Act of 1979 is our security commitment to Taiwan. And That's a commitment to sell them the weapons, the training, the systems, which sometimes components for their domestic security industry, in order to defend themselves, to present to have a credible deterrence in case China should decide it wants to unify by force someday.
Right, right.
And that is a legal commitment we have from the Taiwan Relations Act. That the Taiwan Relations Act also calls upon the United States to maintain the capability to deal with any coercion or threats against Taiwan. Obviously, whether we do anything ourselves is a decision the president has to make, and has to be made according to the constitutional process and the circumstances at the time. But it's something we take seriously. And one thing your viewers might, I think, should know is that our military relationship with Taiwan is managed right here in Honolulu. It's managed out of the Pacific Command, and all the component commands, PAC Fleet, PAC Air, and the U.S. Army Pacific, and Mil-4 PAC.
Right.
And so this is a busy place in term Camp Smith or Makalapa. Those are busy places, Hickam, in terms of security relationship with Taiwan. There is a constant stream of Taiwan military leaders from the very top to non-coms who come through here for meetings to analyze Taiwan's security needs, training programs, exchanges of intelligence and information.
It's all
very
kind of,
busy relationship.
It's kind of below the radar screen, though.
Well, it's
isn't it,
done
for the most
quietly.
part?
Most of it's done quietly,
Done quietly, okay.
but it's important to know.
Right,
I
right.
think it's important for us to, and for people in Hawaii to know that this is something that goes on here.
Well, okay, now, recently, in the last 6 or 7 months, the Taiwan government has organized this, I would call it an offensive, a fairly aggressive offensive, about soliciting American support for the building of an indigenously produced submarine. They don't seem to have gotten very far.
I don't know. I mean, I'm not sure to call it an offensive. I mean, Taiwan, it's just their style, their way of lobbying on things.
The march of the lobbyists.
Taiwan, yeah, I mean, Taiwan's very, very effective at working our Congress, you know, and our community of think tanks. So. Taiwan has decided that at one point they wanted to buy American submarines.
You're talking about nuclear ones?
No, no.
Or
that
old,
never was an idea.
Old decommissioned?
They were they were going to buy newly made diesel submarines.
Okay.
There's one problem with that.
We don't make
we
them.
don't make diesel submarines, and it causes a lot of problems. Our U.S. Navy was never very happy about the idea of us building nuclears, building diesel submarines. So now Taiwan the decision is they're going to make their own diesel submarines, diesel electric submarines, and they've actually gone around and talked to a lot of European countries also. About technology, and they will need some foreign help to do it. They can't really do it. They have very effective shipyards,
Right.
And they've also they have submarines now. They have old submarines, 2 Guppy-class submarines from the Second World War that are U.S. made, and 2 Dutch submarines that date from, I think, the 70s or 80s. And people who know this field, who've seen them, just to cite one person, Tom Fargo, Admiral Fargo, former SINCPAC commander and who was a submariner, has said that it's a miracle how they've maintained the operational capability of these ancient submarines. So, which speaks well to their ability to perhaps make their own. But they would need a lot of help. They've come to us, and we're talking to them about it. No decisions made, and we're still talking to them about it. I would not say it's something that's dead or anything. It's just, you know, we're still in discussions about this issue.
I read something.
Let me just add a point and say
Sure.
that Taiwan, in general, I would say, one of the things that's been very striking in recent years is that they're doing better and better at making weapons themselves.
Right.
At indigenous development of weapons. Their capability has become quite strong. And particularly doing it for what we call asymmetric weapons. Weapons which give them strength, give them deterrent capability at a relatively low cost, and which strike at weaknesses that Beijing has, or difficulties Beijing would have in carrying out either an embargo or an invasion. I mean, for example, Taiwan has just recently produced some boats which our Navy people find quite impressive, sort of fast attack boats. And
I've seen those.
and also
Pictures.
also they've become very capable at mine laying and better at it. Navy mine laying. They have mine laying boats are pretty good. They have good anti-ship missiles. All those things are very relevant to the kind of threat Taiwan faces, and represent indigenous capabilities that they have just fairly recently, last 2 or 3 years.
Some people say that major U.S. arms sales, the era of major U.S. arms sales to Taiwan was over. It's a thing of history. What's your take?
People have said that before, and then after they said it, we sold billions of dollars of arms to Taiwan. So, watch this space. It's an easy comment to make, and then when the next arms sale is notified to Congress, everybody forgets who said that. So I wouldn't. We don't talk ahead of time about what we might sell to Taiwan, and we never actually announce arms sales. We simply, if it is done through the Foreign Military Sale Program, the official program, we have to, and if it's a sale above a certain amount, we do have to notify Congress.
Right.
And so then everyone finds out about it.
Right.
And so if there are new notifications to Congress, you'll know about them.
Right. I was reading a very interesting article by J. Michael Cole. He was with the Taipei Times for a long time, and then he's doing this thing called Think Taiwan for Tsai Ing-wen's foundation. And he was saying that, hey, well, if major arms sales for the United States have, elapsed, there are no more, that's not necessarily a bad thing, because it'll encourage Taiwan to be even more dependent on its own efforts.
Well, I think Taiwan has become, as I'd said before, they've become better at, their own arms industry has become much better.
Right.
But there are things which they're going to want to acquire.
Right.
I mean, first of all, our military relationship with Taiwan is not just arms.
Right.
It's also, we sell sometimes technology.
Right.
We provide training.
Right.
All of these things are happening. One of the things that you remember, in the Obama administration, we notified Congress of $12 billion in arms and training sales to Taiwan. So digesting all that takes time.
Especially for a small country.
I mean, in the last year, Taiwan has had shipments arrive of Apache E-Series helicopters, Black Hawk helicopters, and other equipment. So it's coming in now. So if Taiwan does develop indigenous submarines, that will require some foreign technologies, some of which could be from the United States.
Right.
It'll probably require foreign components.
Right.
I'm not saying it's going to, but I mean, if they go, I mean, they said they're going to do it, so that could create sales. The U.S. Congress has passed legislation, which the president has signed, about the transfer and that happened last year. The transfer to Taiwan of some frigates. And so that will be an arms sale.
Right.
The administration has not notified Congress that it's, with the sort of green light to go ahead with that. But the fact that the legislation was passed and the president signed the legislation, shows that it's probably going to happen.
Well, our friend Denny Roy, and for the benefit of those in the audience, Denny Roy is a researcher at the East-West Center who's spent a lot of his professional life focusing on Taiwan issues. As I pointed out to you, there was an article that appeared in today's Taipei Times. He's suggesting that there was likely to be a new crisis in the Taiwan Straits. And this was an excerpt from an article he published in National Interest Journal. What's your view on that?
I worked for many years for the East-West Center.
Right.
And I have great respect for Denny Roy. He and I have jointly done many programs and many things together. And I actually just saw him yesterday.
Is that right?
I read the article. For the most part, it's a great article. I think it's just, he's a little bit alarmist about, what he's saying is that the election, getting back to our earlier discussion about Tsai Ing-wen, the opposition candidate, he's saying that if she gets elected, because she's so identified with Taiwan independence, because Beijing doesn't like her and doesn't like her political party and doesn't like the positions of her political party, that's going to cause a crisis. It will cause some nervousness. No question about it. Let's be frank about it. Just like the election of her party the last time in the year 2000 caused a lot of nervousness. And the re-election in 2004 caused nervousness. Beijing won't like it. They would rather have the ruling party, the current ruling party, re-elected.
Right.
There's no question about that. But as you pointed out earlier, and I agreed, the DPP, the opposition party, and its current leader, Ms. Tsai, is more pragmatic than the previous leader or the party previously was. And I think Beijing also has learned to, Beijing has not been reacting in a hysterical way about the election up till now. And they do have contacts with Taiwan's opposition party. They talk to each other.
Right.
And the opposition party is being very careful themselves to keep their contacts and their channels open to China and to the Communist Party in China. So I'm not quite as worried as Denny seems to be. But I mean, his article still makes some good points, and then makes some good points about the importance of maintaining U.S. commitment, about the importance of being clear to Beijing that this is an issue that has to be resolved peacefully.
Right.
And that's always been U.S. policy. Any change in the status of Taiwan has to be something that the people on Taiwan agree to and are comfortable with, and it has to be done peacefully.
Well, you've given us a lot to think about here today, and it was really great to have you onto the show. I'd like to thank everyone out there for watching. I'm your host, Bill Sharp. You're watching ThinkTech Asia, and our guest today has been Ambassador Raymond Burghardt, who's chairman of the board of the American Institute in Taiwan. We'll see you next week. Thank you for watching. And there we go. We had a map that we never used.
No, it's okay. We didn't get.